Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast, where leadership meets entertainment. We've all heard the term coach up or coach out. Today, we are going to dive into what coaching up looks like, why it's important, and the best way to do it to be effective. Ron, before we dive in, how are things going with you?
Things are going well. As you know, I'm about to travel to Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Yes.
I've got a speaking engagement there, so I'm excited about that. The podcast is doing well. The company's growing. I'm going to be talking more about that later. But things are great. Very blessed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that we've heard from a few of our longtime listeners, and they've really described us with what we're doing as being disruptors of the leadership industry. And it's wild. I don't think we could agree more. We really are disrupting the status quo as far as leadership podcasts. Why do you think we've been given that title?
Well, Kristin, I think we knew that going into this when we planned how we were going to do the podcast. Everyone uses the exact same format. We should probably not put this on there because someone's going to steal our disruptor format. Mm-hmm. No, we just wanted to we say this every time, where leadership meets entertainment. There is nothing wrong with making learning fun. There's nothing wrong with not following the script sometimes. Sometimes you have to think outside the box. And frankly, I've told you this so many times, and I mean this with all due respect, but I love to listen to podcasts, and in particular leadership podcasts, but I have to speed up to get to any substance because the intros take so long.
Right.
And I just love our format. I loved it from the beginning, and I do now, and I'm glad people are recognizing that we are disrupting. We went in to disrupt.
Right, exactly. And the whole point behind it is you and I, we appreciate and covet transparency. We want to be real with people. And I feel like so many leadership podcasts out there, it's a giant veneer, and you don't hear them getting raw and real with you very often. They like to throw out the big words and act as if, but we are two leaders that have each had lengthy leadership careers, and we've seen it all, probably not everything, but we've seen enough to be able to bring it to the table and legitimately help people get to the next level. And then also, I think we do this really well, Ron. We understand what people are going through, and we sit there with them in that moment and say, gossip in the workplace, right? Our last episode, or a toxic manager. We're diving into that, and we're saying we know these things exist, and we know that it's absolute hell to work for somebody like that or to be in a gossip-ridden environment. And we're exposing that and then providing solutions to work your way out of the situations that you've been put in.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I appreciate folks calling us disruptors, because that's exactly what we came here to do, but with purpose, right?
And Kristin, just one more thing on this. I know this is an alliteration, but we wanted this to be raw, relevant, and realistic. And we, as you said, we decided going into this that we would leave no stone unturned. In other words, we did one on diversity burnout because it's what the stats were saying.
Right.
And, that was controversial, but we went into it with an open mind, an objective mind, and we did it. So we do go off script, which is fun. And but we do want it to be raw. We want it to be real. I just not long ago, I listened to this presentation on conflict resolution. And Chris and I almost laughed because they give you the steps, right, of conflict resolution. And then they end it there, like, boom, the conflict is gone. And I was like, oh, my God, when two people hate each other, I've said this many times, conflict resolution may not work. And that's when you have to put boundaries. That's when you got to manage. That's when you even have to micromanage sometimes for a bit. So that's the realism that I'm talking about. We're not going to give you formulas and guarantee that those are going to work, because human behavior, there's so many dynamics, and it's always changing and evolving. And that's what we try to bring is that real, make it relevant, and make it raw.
Exactly. I mean, we've even done a podcast episode on HR, and I know we have HR listeners, but the truth is there a lot of times there's a retaliation factor when you go to HR about somebody, depending on the company, right? So we've dove into that because so many podcasts will say, oh, if you're experiencing XYZ, go to HR for that. And we've really exposed that it's not that simple. There's a lot to it. So we're not afraid to go there. And like we always say, if you want us to cover something, we've done it before, let us know. Send us a DM. We will dive into the topic that you are interested to learn more about.
Yeah. And we do have some topics looming. It's interesting, Kristin, when podcast meets everyday life, as you know, one of our main listeners is the head of an HR firm.
Yeah.
And we had coffee talking about some other stuff that we're going to be doing. I'll announce later. But anyway, she said, I think you've been a little hard on HR. And we had a great conversation. And she did tell me some wonderful things that her company or her HR firm does. And so we also, if we need to adjust a little bit, we will. So I did tell her that I would bring that up. So we do appreciate, and I will tell you, there was a couple of situations where I had to take pretty severe action against an employee, and HR was helpful with me on that. So thank you, HR.
Yeah, you can be the nice one. Good cop, bad cop. I haven't heard or seen great experiences. I see it more of a legal a department that's there to keep you out of legal hot water. But I'm sure, you know what? Why don't we get some material from her and we can air the great things that other companies should be doing in terms of HR, and we can learn from it. Maybe turn that around, turn the tide there.
I will reach out to her.
I think that'd be good.
We'll make that happen.
Love it. All right. Let's talk about managing up and should you try it. Now, the idea of managing up might suggest notions of an incompetent manager with whom you can't stand to work with, right? The manager, and it's not always managers. You could be the manager and you have an associate. And this has happened to me. Ron, we were talking offline about this a bit, where it's you and I have both been seen as a excellent leader and the ability to pinpoint areas of opportunity, let's just say that, and expose them. And I know that I've personally been brought associates that were like, okay, this person's not working out for this leader or this leader. I'm going to bring them to you because I know you're either going to be able to coach them up or coach them out, right? And that's just the truth of it. And there's a lot of leaders that can do that. And when you think of coaching up, it's not always a leader to a leader, right? It can be a leader to an associate. So the scenario I'm talking about right now is a manager being coached up by their leader. But if the manager is constantly micromanaging or giving vague feedback and, let's say, forcing you to work overtime, at its core, managing up isn't always about trying to fix a bad manager or manipulating a manager into doing what you want. Rather, what it is managing up is a soft skill centered around using the traits of a good manager to help you bring out the best in yourself as an employee. When done effectively, managing up makes you and your manager's day-to-day job easier.
No, I like that. And let's get a Harvard Business Review. This is their definition. It's being the most effective employee you can be, creating value for your boss and your company. And Kristin, we will talk more about this, but if employees only understood, I get it. There's all kinds of managers, leaders who have blind spots or maybe the wrong motives, but you can still make yourself valuable even in that scenario. So a lot of times we need to look inward instead of outward. But let's lay this foundation. This is what managing up is not. And I'm going to be honest, when I first started researching this, there was a couple of these I thought it was, but it made sense when I went through it. Going above your manager's head to have your ideas heard. Now, I've spoken about this before, so I won't again, but I had people come to me wanting to go above their manager's head, and I would tell them, I will make sure this is unbiased, but we're going to have your manager in here if we're going to talk about them. It would have to be something very extreme before I'm going to entertain that, like if, someone was assaulted or something like that.
Right. Can I stop right there?
Yeah.
There is something that I've seen happening, and I feel like it happens with a good intention, and it's that very thing. I've had new leadership come in and say they're 2 levels above me, and they meet my team and they're trying to be accessible and tangible, and they say, "If you need anything, let me know." I dislike that. I get where they're coming from. They're trying to be, like I said, tangible, accessible, human, right? But what that does is that breaks that chain of command. And I've had employees once in a while, "Oh, I reached out and shared this idea." I'm like, "Hold on. You need to go to me first. There's still a chain of command." "Oh, but they said, reach out with anything." So talk to us about the proper way to do that.
Well, there was a trend in the mid to late 90s. It was basically a team-based management approach, and it was peer-to-peer management instead of having the hierarchy. And it turns out in almost every company, it ended up being chaotic and created divisions among peers. So as much as we call ourselves disruptors, and I don't often like the chain of command, it is tried and proven that you need that, because that is exactly what happens. And then if you get an insecure executive, then they like being in the in crowd. They like to show that they have some authority, and they might entertain that. And it just never works out well. So unfortunately, you need hierarchy, and you got to have a chain of command and some structure in that, or things can really get chaotic.
Yeah, exactly. All
So
right. Thanks for addressing that, because that's stuck in my craw. I'll tell you what.
No, and rightfully so. So once again, I want to repeat, do not go above your manager's head unless you absolutely have to. If you have to, you need to be ready for the repercussions of that, right?
Yeah.
But here's another way. It's not flipping the script and trying to manage your manager instead. All of a sudden you declare yourself, "I'm the great leader and I'm going to let my manager know everything they're doing wrong." That never ends well either.
No.
Also, trying to mold your manager into someone different. I had someone, this is so funny, Kristin, I've never told you this, or our audience. I had someone literally about a week after I got promoted, they brought me their master's degree thesis on communication and laid it on my desk and said, I would like it if you would review this. It was certainly passive aggressive. It was, they were hoping, I guess, I would get this, they wanted to be subliminal, but I knew exactly what that was. And the funny part was, this is one of those employees who's insecure, paranoid, no one liked them, but in their brain, they were the greatest leader that God ever put on the face of this earth. And it's someone that I had multiple problems with and I actually had to take action. I did read some of it just out of interest, and it was pretty good, but always remember this: anyone can research and write a paper. That doesn't make you a leader.
Right. Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah. Another one is always judging and evaluating. Here's the problem. In your mind, don't get me wrong, managers, as I've already said, are going to make mistakes. But if you're judging and evaluating all the time, and especially if you go back to last week and you start gossiping about it, that is not going to bode well for your career at all. Developing a positive and productive relationship with your manager. That one to me was a gray area. I left it in because, it's probably warrants a discussion, but I do think developing a positive and productive relationship with your manager is a good thing, but I guess they were saying that shouldn't be your only goal, is that you've got a good relationship.
I can see, that's almost like, I feel like that is the door to coaching up, right? Because generally speaking, if you're going to coach your manager, manage the manager, whatever, they need to know you're coming from the right place. And you do that by developing the positive and productive relationship with your manager. So I do see it as, to your point, that's not only what it is, but that, in my opinion, is a stepping stone in the right direction.
Yeah. This one, I honestly almost deleted it. And I'll be very honest to our listeners. If you want your executive coaching certificate, it's not going to say this. At least not to this extent. Learning and adapting to your manager's communication style and way of working. I do not agree with that, simply because there are times when if your manager's really busy and you recognize the season, you might want to give them a quick email, a text, depending on what they want, or a sticky note. I mean, back in the day, I knew a guy, he'd rather put write down a sticky note and leave. So your manager does get to control the flow, at least the flow of communication.
Right.
Like I literally am coaching someone, and their management team started using Facebook Messenger as the primary mode of communication. So that means if you come in, if you don't accept everyone as your friend, and some people don't want people to look at their personal life.
That's very unprofessional.
So
that must be a ma and pa. I mean, that
it is. No,
pretty podunk.
Yeah. They
don't want to pay for Microsoft Teams.
Here's the sad part. They actually have Zoom and they have email and things like that. But it developed. Here's what happens, Kristin. I'm glad you brought that up. It started with 2 people and it started growing. And what happens if you don't nip something in the bud, it just becomes the norm. And that's exactly what they did. They should have stopped it early. So now this person is having to change that. And get people communicating on a different platform for sure. Do you really want Zuckerberg in your meetings? I'm not sure.
That's just so wild to me. Oh my gosh. What's next? Snapchat?
Well, I did, of course, when you're coaching and it's on Zoom. So I did do some face management, as we say.
That's hilarious.
I wanted to get in on the communication, just for fun.
Yeah.
So when are we having happy hour? The other one is communicating your own preferred work and communication style. So that part I agree with. You don't tell your manager, this is how I want to be communicated with. You need to learn the flow. And this is where I talk about in my leadership course. And this did not make my book, but I really like it. It's the difference between training and experience in leadership. And once you once you gain experience and you learn how your agency communicates, the jargon, the acronyms and all that, it makes you way more effective. And that's why a lot of young, ambitious leaders step in. They do have talent, but they have to understand you can't hate the process.
Right.
You just can't. You need the process for you to be effective.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. But that's what managing up is not.
I have to add in, I should have, on this last one with the adapting to your manager's communication style and way of working. It was so funny. It made me think of when I was first like a brand new teller. And in the beginning, I had a younger manager. And that person got promoted. And then I ended up with a manager who was a little older. And I was so used to saying, oh, may I take a 10? Right? Like when we wanted our 10-minute break. And so I remember the first time I said it to her, she was like, what? And I was like, oh, may I take a 10? And she was, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I realized, I'm like, oh, okay. Would you mind if I took my 10-minute break? Right? But it was a serious thing. And then I made sure going forward that I spelled it out. And
she
eventually,
thought you were talking about a denomination of bills.
Yeah,
right?
like a $10 bill, probably. I mean, I was in a teller door. She's like, excuse me, may you take a 10? Absolutely not. But so, yeah. But that's a real thing. You have to understand age and, all of that plays into it.
Yeah.
So, you don't have to fully adapt to it, but you do need to be aware of it.
Yeah. Now, here is a great takeaway, and you already defined managing up, but here is another expansion of the definition.
Yeah.
The principle of managing up is understanding by gaining an awareness of what their goals are and how your manager operates. You can nurture a healthy relationship that is beneficial to not only both of you, but also the larger organization. And that's where I always say, don't be afraid to engage in small talk, because you're learning each other. And it's okay to ask a manager how they're doing. Some people forget that managers have feelings too. And these things build rapport. And I will not touch on this long, but the best example, only because I mentioned it in an earlier podcast, was my mentor, a guy that I still admire greatly, Dr. Sam Samples. I told you this story also, Kristin, but I play guitar, and then he finds out, and he's got a guitar collection. So he had never invited anyone to his house. He invited me to his house for dinner. and I played guitar. It was the best evening, and it bonded. We're still bonded.
Yeah.
And I don't think we would have been in that position. I'm not saying you're going to go to your boss's house, but I'm saying if you find a common ingredient, it makes for great conversation, and it is
Absolutely.
bonding. So managing up does have the potential to help your manager, but you got to get yourself in a position to have influence. Don't try to manage up if you don't have the influence to do it.
Right. And I feel like on that, you really need to check in with yourself and say, is this coming from the right place? Excuse me. Because if it's not going to be received well.
That's a
So
great point.
yeah, take a minute and check in with yourself on that.
So when
Yeah.
Kristin tells me to speak up or move my mic, I have to ask, where's this coming from?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So here's how you manage up. Part of managing up is using the traits of a great manager to support your own manager. So in previous research, and we looked into the cultureamp.com, they identified the 11 essential traits of great managers. And so what we're going to do is show you how to apply those traits in managing up with your boss. So the first one here, and we're going to rotate through these, is be caring. Like I just said, check in with yourself and make sure you're coming from the right place before you decide to manage up. But managers who are caring, they take time to get to know the individuals in their team or on their team. Employees who manage up take the time to get to know their boss. They show genuine interest in your manager's well-being. They're empathetic to their experiences and celebrate their successes.
Yeah, the next one is coaching. And you can't really be a coach from the sense of you're the boss, but you can certainly provide feedback. And again, once they get to know you and they know it's coming from a good place, I've talked a lot about contrarians in this podcast, and those are people who will give you honest feedback. It's just they're doing it from the right place. They will look objectively at a situation.
Mm-hmm.
Your boss can gain a lot of respect for you if they understand you care about the overall vision, and that's why you're giving the feedback. You want everyone to do well.
Right. I think that plays out in the family as well, right?
It does.
When, it's always dangerous when anyone in my family knows when they ask me if something looks good on them or does it accentuate the wrong areas, they're going to get an honest answer. And it's not because I want anyone to feel bad, but I want people to be presenting themselves in the best light. And that goes to when my kids walk out the door, I want to make sure they look right. Right? Then brush teeth, brushed hair.
Do they get to answer that for you? Like, does Dave get to tell you?
Yes, he absolutely does. And here's it's so wild because I will literally ask him and he's honest with me and I don't get offended. But I don't think enough people are strong enough to actually handle the truth. I'll just be honest. But because I know he's not trying to make me feel bad about myself. He's just answering my question honestly. And then I regard his opinion, right? So I think it all has to come from the right place, but which leads perfectly into communication or communicating. So a great way to manage up when it comes to communication is to understand your manager's preferred communication channels. I've mentioned on a previous podcast, I had a banker who worked for me. He didn't like when we would instant message him. He was like, slap a Post-it note on my desk. You mentioned that earlier. Someone like Post-it notes. I mean, it's going back in time 30 years, but I only did that for a little while and realized quickly it wasn't working. But that said, it's really important that you understand the preferred communication channels, even if it's a Post-it note. So in addition to your regular one-on-one, which for everyone listening, you should be having one-on-ones with your leader more than once a year. I can't even believe when people tell me I meet with my manager once a year and it's for my review. That's unacceptable. So you should be getting regular one-on-ones, and that before then or at that time is when you should ask if there's any questions. And if you have something you want to bring up, that's your time to do it. And then you can effectively communicate with your manager's needs by actively listening to them. Ron, what is the term when they're half listening and they're just all they're thinking about is what they're going to say next?
Well, it could be distracted.
Right.
we have an external and internal voice. And that's why people, by the way, on the spectrum, they have trouble with that.
Yeah.
But you know something, Kristin, it's interesting when you say that you mentioned Culture Amp, and that's where we got this information from. And it conflicts a little bit with the Harvard Review. There were 3 different things on the Harvard Review that I disagreed with, and this gave some validation. You definitely want to find out how your boss or manager, superior likes to be communicated with. And here's the other thing is that can change depending on the circumstances. Like we had hurricane awareness here and we were running drills. Well, that's not the time to call a meeting with me. So a lot of this is you need to use discretion, communicate the way they want, but know when to communicate. Don't walk in a crisis and decide it's all about you and you want a meeting.
Right, exactly. Read the room, know your audience. Timing is everything.
Timing is everything.
Oh, goodness.
Number 4 here is development. And if you are ambitious, you do need to let your superior know, hey, I would like to be considered at some point in my career as a team lead or manager. And excuse me, most leaders will take pride in giving you advice and helping you along with your career path.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that.
The other thing is being emotionally resilient. I just talked about that when I ask for feedback and I get honest feedback, I personally would say I'm emotionally resilient. And most good leaders are, right? So, and it can be a little bit different here. So I'll explain this a little more. So are you able to remain calm and productive under pressure and cope well with change? I mean, you want to ask yourself that. A lot of people have issue with change and they don't do well with it. So you want to reflect on that. Can you help your manager when they're under pressure and experiencing change? We all have gone through this, right? We have to pivot and go in a different direction. Sometimes it's rapid fire and you have to be able to prepare yourself for it and be successful through that change. Now, this is a great way to manage up. If you notice your manager is dealing with extra stress and pressure, offer to help them run a team meeting or take on an additional task to reduce their workload. I've had associates do that for me and I'm forever faithful to them. So when they go on and they need me to, do an assessment on them when they're getting a new job or looking to get promoted, I am 100% in their court because they treated me so well during my time of need.
Yeah. I tell everyone this, if you get your feelings hurt easily, you do not want to be a manager. If you want everybody to love you, and that's so important to you, you do not want to go into management. And it's just a reality. Yeah. You've got to have that resiliency. Right. The next one's fair treatment. And that's something, fairness and equity is something that we all have to have, from giving assignments to taking assignments. So as a direct report, you can engage in fair treatment with your manager by giving them positive feedback. And a lot of people feel like that's brown nosing. They only give you don't want your manager cringing when you come in because they know you're going to be given feedback, negative feedback all the time. It's okay to stop by and even keep it short, but you did a great job leading that meeting. That was a great staff meeting. I appreciate it. Boom, done. Yeah,
absolutely. So another one, fostering innovation. And, that's a super buzzword. An important component of fostering innovation is avoiding micromanagement. Nothing will snuff out creativity faster than micromanagement. And this is important as managing up as well. You don't want to seem overbearing, like you were just saying, Ron, or controlling of your manager's behaviors. Help to foster innovation by learning from failures and achievements and letting your boss know that you value autonomy, right? I mean, that one speaks to me so much.
Well, it does. And it forced managers all over the world really to look at autonomy from working from home, alternate work schedules, all these things come into play. But in my leadership course, The Fundamentals of Leadership, I do discuss of how we must foster creativity. And a lot of times it's getting out of the box even physically. So you meet for coffee or you go for a walk to discuss something, because it frees the brain to think, because we get so accustomed to being in a certain environment that sometimes that can actually hinder this creativity that we often need so badly.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Next is overall manager effectiveness. People willingly recommend effective managers to others, and the people they manage feel valued. Your effectiveness when you manage up is tied to how you make your manager feel valued and share in mutual success. So don't just try to hog all the credit to make yourself look good. Include your manager, and that will help you a great deal as well.
Oh, absolutely. And also results oriented. With a results oriented manager, a way to manage up is to acknowledge the importance of performance standards and meet them, right? I mean, that's like bare minimum. Meet the performance standards, know what they are. Supporting your teammates in maintaining performance standards also helps your manager and your team succeed. And you don't want that weak link. I always say, and I know there's tons of sayings about the weak link, right? But you want everyone on your team to be firing, right?
That's right.
You want everyone to be doing well. You don't want to feel good because you're better than I don't know, Jack, who's not performing, and you get to puff your chest out because you're better than Jack.
Yeah.
How about you try to bring Jack up and you're growing yourself at that same time? So it's really important that you think about that holistically.
Kristin, yeah, that's a great point. And this one, I've got a quick story. The next one is technical capability. If you have greater technical capability than your manager, help them learn the needed skills. I remember
Amen.
when we started COVID, we were using Teams, Microsoft Teams.
Yeah.
And we started having meetings, and I noticed a couple of the employees were doing something that I didn't know. I don't remember now what it was, whether it was a breakout room, something. So I reached out to a person, an employee that I knew had really good technical capabilities. I said, hey, can you help me do that? I really like that. And they were happy to do that and showed me a couple other tricks of the trade.
Right.
Here's a quick spin on that. I ran into this employee recently, and this employee was on a TV show, on a series. And I got to watch it. It was crazy. It's about friendship, the TV show. So that was super cool. But this is a person who was innovative, and I knew I could trust them. They're not going to go down the hall and go, can you believe Ron didn't know how to log into whatever? There was that kind of person, but it helped me a lot. And it immediately put that person on my radar for future promotion because I saw how they operate.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up, because last week, as most know, we talked about gossip in the workplace, right? And that is something, I'm 42. Yes, I had people working for me that were maybe not half my age, but at least 10 years younger. And I definitely, as much as I feel like I'm pretty techie, they surpassed me. And I think it's important not to feel self-conscious about that. And you can be humble and ask for help. Like Ron, you just mentioned, I've definitely asked for help with certain things, but it's important to then write it down if that's what you want to do, or make yourself a note of how to do it the next time. I've seen so many memes where they're like, oh, when your manager asks you how to sign into whatever it is for the 20th time and they get paid 3 times more than you, right? So it's important. Be humble, ask for the assistance, but then you want to help yourself by taking note of what it was so that you're not having to ask the exact same question multiple times. But I'll tell you what, to your point, when somebody has helped me out and they haven't gossiped, getting back to that gossip episode, I know people have gossiped to me, even though I didn't partake. Oh my gosh, I had to help Tina sign into Teams for the 20th time. My gosh, you know how much more money she makes than me? That happens all the time, and you don't want to do that.
And Kristin, I use these examples when I teach face management. Is your manager's trying to log in and you're rolling your eyes? Don't think that doesn't go unnoticed. People notice the body language behind it. Or I used to call. I worked with someone. We called them the train because they go. I said, you huff and puff like a train. These things are important. Body language. If you have not, go back and listen to the episodes, 2 episodes on body language. These things are vital.
Yes. Okay. Wait. I have to. The huff and puff. Okay. I had an employee, and I believe I brought this up on an early episode, but he would do that in his teller window when he was helping customers. And I was like, yo, I didn't say yo, but I'm not going to say his name. I'm like, hey, you're doing a lot of, I'm like, and that makes the customer feel like they're a nuisance, or they're putting you out. And he goes, I'm breathing, Kristin. And so I'm like, what do you say to that? I'm like, I think you can breathe differently than the huff and puff, right? So, that is a complete.
He goes negative. On a list, and it doesn't say promotion at the top.
It's not a promotion list. That is 100% true.
Even his response to you tells you you've got a problem employee, then you're going to have to deal with it for sure.
Yeah, I inherited that one. I didn't hire. Just want to put that out there.
Okay, we'll let you slide then.
There's a big difference when you inherit somebody or you made that hiring decision, right?
I'll
made
huff
a few
and I'll puff
bad
and I'll
hiring
blow your
decisions too, but I'm breathing. But anyways, people are just, the audacity is just wild. Gosh. Okay. Vision and goal setting. Does your manager help you see the vision and strategy of your company? That's really important. And for people that have worked in corporate, that changes like at least every year. Your vision and your strategy is your mission statement, all of that generally is changing rapidly. So you need to stay on top of what it is. And if your manager isn't bringing that up to you, okay, here's our strategy and here's what you're doing and how it ties into the greater strategy, you want to go seek that out yourself and work with them on that, okay? And let them explain the vision and discuss how you fit into the model. Again, if they're unable to do that, work together and figure it out, right? Things change so fast. We're not all going to be up to speed all the time. So basically, include your manager in some of your personal goal settings.
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes you do have to work through, the vision, as I said, is stationary, but the mission is evolving and changing rapidly sometimes. And making sure you're on the same page with your manager is vital, and it can take you a very long ways. All right, Kristin, I'm going to recap a little bit here.
All right.
When done well, managing up makes your manager and, of course, your job easier. Understand the best way to communicate with your boss, demonstrating that you care, meeting your performance goals, and more will not go unnoticed. Managing up can be especially important with a newly hired manager or when you change teams. Demonstrating these behaviors from the get-go will start your relationship off on the right foot. Managing up with a long-time boss can also help you renew your relationship. Make a few goals related to managing up to prioritize your next one-on-one, like talking through communication or getting to know something personal about your manager, or understanding your manager's development goals. With these tools in hand, you're on your way to a better manager and a better relationship at work. And I want to add probably a future promotion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this is not brown nosing. I want to point out, Ron and I are against brown nosing. There is a clear difference. This has been mentioned many times throughout this segment. You want it to come from the right place. When you're coming from the right place and it's not just you, I feel like that's when it's brown nosing, is when it's all about you and your objective. When you are truly taking all these steps and putting the time in because you want your manager to succeed and you want your team to succeed and you ultimately will succeed along with them. That's when it's so important and it's a very positive thing. Much different than brown nosing.
Yeah, and most managers can tell when you're brown nosing anyway. Now, I do know there's some that are also insecure and they adhere to it and they embrace it, but most people know if it's coming from a pure place versus a manipulative place.
Most do, some don't, and that's when it's that's when someone is not self-aware, and that's pretty grotesque to watch. Also,
that's unfortunate.
It really is.
That requires some serious managing up if you got that kind of a leader.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Kristin, this was fun.
Yeah, another hot topic, and we didn't steer away from the truth.
Well, I think honestly, if people will listen to this, take some notes, I really do believe it will help you in your career, but also help you not be so frustrated and stressed about your job.
Yeah.
Always be solution minded, we say all the time, instead of problem minded. I just know people are suffering in their jobs, but they may not have taken affirmative steps to help their manager manage up.
Right. Help me help you.
Help me help you. Let me help you. That was a
That's
great
what we're
movie
here
line.
for. I know it was.
All right, everybody. Be the leader you're meant to be.
We'll see you next week.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.